Welcome, Peter. I've got Peter Cheese, the Chief Executive of the CIPD, with me here today. Welcome to the pod, Peter.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Good stuff, and we're going to talk about various things, some future of work stuff. But we're going to start with, I was watching you earlier on a panel, and that was focused on the ubiquitous subject of AI and its relationship to burnout and productivity. So I guess, what was the just for the benefit of everybody who's listening to this who wasn't at that? What was the thrust of that, and did it change your thinking at all? The conversation.
Yeah, I mean, the thrust of it very much was, as you said, it was about how can AI, frankly, improve the well-being of people, both at work, but also actually we strayed into sort of broader themes, like, can it help with some of these apps around sort of psychotherapy, if you will. Mm-hmm. But it was a good broad conversation in the end, because it wasn't just about sort of specific apps. Mm-hmm. It was much more about this wider impact AI can have in the world of work. Mm-hmm. And certainly the perspective I always come from and have come from for a long time on this is that AI can enhance work, but it's not going to happen by accident. We've really got to lean into this agenda, and I particularly talk about that from the HR profession standpoint, to work with the technologists and say, well, how will this impact jobs, and how do we design work and design jobs based on the principles of good work? And one of the most overriding principles of good work is ultimately it should be good for our well-being. So if we sort of follow that line of thought, then I think we can create a better future of work, but we've all got to work together to ensure that we get there.
Yeah, and I guess I was picking up themes around, sort of straight line thinking is obviously it's about efficiency, isn't it?
Yeah.
But that kind of misses the point a bit of good work.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you're right. I mean, efficiency and productivity are very big subjects, and we know at a macroeconomic level it's a constant debate, and the UK apparently being low in the league table of per capita productivity, which has always bemused me in some different ways. But it is a very important agenda. I mean, to put it in a different way, how do we get the best out of our people? How do we ensure that they're focused on the right things, that we've got cultures that support them? And if we do those things, then we should be able to enhance the output of what they create. And of course, artificial intelligence is seen to be one of those tools which can enhance what we're able to produce, but it's got to be done from a human-centric perspective, and we talked a bit about this in the panel. So good work, which is very much about the future of work as human-centric thinking, designing work around what gets the best out of our people, including the best use of their skills and capabilities. And people love to talk about AI and say maybe it can reduce the more tedious and boring aspects of our jobs, or it can help us be more organised and things like that. And doubtless it can, but I don't think that's ultimately the long-term goal.
It's interesting, isn't it, how the, I don't know, I suppose I'm slightly sort of cynical perspective in that it was mentioned on the panel that the human-centric, they have become the sort of automatic professionals, whether HR professionals or otherwise, the professional response to AI. AI is coming. We need to manage it and introduce it in the right way. But I suppose, do you think that's more than just a kind of a sort of convenient, quick surface level response? Do we really know how to have a human?
Well, that's the bigger question, isn't it? I think as a mantra, as a goal, I think it's appropriate. Yeah. We should think work should be good for us, as I said, and we have that opportunity, perhaps like we've never had before with technology. Because and I reflect on this on the panel. I mean, if you go back in history, and I've worked a lot around technology through my career, it's certainly true to say that a lot of technology that we've implemented has not increased well-being at work. I mean, we can look at all the stats on stress. Yeah, absolutely. And that in many ways we felt constantly on, we can't switch off, which is why we have these debates about maybe legislation like they have in France, in order to allow people to switch off. You think, how have we created a world like that? So this will take a really concerted effort. It's not true to say that just because we have this super clever technology, by magic, suddenly all of our work is going to be so much better. So yes, we need to understand how will it improve productivity, but we've certainly got to understand how will it make as I said, work better. And seeing as a key outcome, and I've long believed this, that a key outcome of the future of work should be better well-being.
Yeah.
As I said, work ultimately should be good for us.
Which is why I like the job design frame for this, because yes, okay, if you're just bringing it for a narrow goal of efficiency, that's not going to get you very far. But if you are looking to design jobs which are about productivity, output, but also well-being and employee experience, then I think that allows you to think about what AI can do and how it can do it.
Yeah, without doubt. And of course, it's not just your job and task design. People rightly, I think, recognize that jobs made up of tasks, and you can reconfigure those tasks in lots of ways, and AI can help you reconfigure those. I made the point that I think ultimately every job could be impacted by AI. But yeah, so it's a really important agenda, as I said before, for the HR profession and well-being professionals to lean into this debate about, so what are the principles of good jobs and good job design, and how do we all work together to create that? We as the CIPD have done work over the years on the principles of what does define a good job. Interestingly, those principles are not new. They've been around for some time, but we haven't really embraced them in ways enough. So, I've often given examples, again, going back to previous sort of technology evolutions, if you will, of many jobs that we've created are really not good jobs.
No.
You can think of some of these automated logistics operations and things like that, where in truth, what seems to have emerged is that robotics and automation AI can do lots of very clever things. But interestingly, some of the things that we find so innate as humans we don't even think about are very hard for robotics and AI to do. So multi-sensory things, ability to sense, find objects in random arrays of things, and be able to manipulate your environment in a multi-sensory way. So all of those sorts of things are so innate in humans when you think about them, but they are pretty hard to replicate logically.
Yeah, and in my old life with the esteemed Sir Cary Cooper, that was all. The whole piece there was about good days at work, creating good days at work, and all the classic stuff: purpose, meaning, social connection, task achievement, those kind of things. They are being those how that is delivered to a person are being threatened or could be enhanced by AI, of course.
Yeah, definitely, and I've known Cary for many years, and he is one of the leading advocates of these ideas, and has been for a very long time. But as I said, I think we've all got to lean a little bit more into this, really understand that how we do create these better tasks, better workflows, better processes, supportive cultures. We've absolutely acknowledged that this is not just about the job and task that you do and enhances your well-being. It's also the kind of support you get from your manager, the relationships that you have at work, and the support that you are given, basic training and development of your skills and capabilities, given the right tools and those sorts of things.
Well, skills is key, isn't it? It came up on the panel.
It is. Yeah. And that, of course, is another very big debate that's emerging from this whole AI story that, as you said right at the very beginning, is concerning a lot of debates, as it should, is what will be the impact on skills. And so some of the work we're doing as the CIPD, working with a range of others. We're working on a program sponsored by Innovate UK called Bridge AI, working with a lot of different groups, looking at things like, can we better understand the kinds of skills that people will need in a world which is much more enabled by AI. And that's a really important debate. I mean, it's grown out of a debate about digital skills, because for a long time we've debated, everybody needs digital skills. And you can go back in time and people think it's about learning coding, but it's not. It's not. Not really
now
at all. Not now. So a lot of impacts in those terms, and of course, helping to upskill and reskill people to be able to adapt to a future work.
Yeah, and AI is. What two examples of this? AI is really quite elliptical as a concept, isn't it? Because with skills, it's about the skills you need for a world in which AI is going to become dominant or a dominant force, or the future, but it's also that AI will give you those skills and can give you them. So you start, rather than going through. I just did my onboarding somewhere, and it was the old sort of e-learning, going through slides, in that. But it's going to become a conversation, isn't it, with AI? So it's very. I think it's very nuanced. The other one is, which I was thinking about when I was listening to your panel, is so if you take like a psychosocial risk factor perspective on AI, which is it? You know, is it a risk because of the piece about job security and the worries and the concerns it's creating for a whole tranche of population, or is it a control factor because it's making work easier to do? And of course, I guess it's kind of both.
Yeah.
But then there's a question about, well, if it is both, how do we get line managers, how do we get well-being leaders to HR leaders to a place where they can understand those nuances?
Yeah, no, absolutely right. And as with anything in life, things are rarely one thing or the other. They're usually combinations of things. But starting with the thought about skills and the opportunity AI gives us to improve and upskill and reskill and reinvent learning, which is something I and many others talked about for a long time. We really do need to up our game in terms of how we deliver learning, and we talk a lot about things like learning in the flow of work and using all these tools which can help coach us and teach us, or if we have a question as we're doing a task, well then help me answer the question there and then. Obviously there are many tasks now where people are looking at things like virtual reality and gaming and augmented reality and all these sorts of things. So those are really important. But yes, when you look at the whole subject of AI application and development, yes, it's a really interesting balance between supporting people but not overly interfering. We talked a bit on the panel about some ideas where, AI already can sort of monitor your mood and it can reflect things back to you. It can act as a sort of coach or almost an online therapist. But my goodness, it has other implications that go with that. The concern that people have about monitoring. Now, the reality is we're being monitored in 1,001 different ways almost all the time.
Yeah.
But within the workplace in particular, it can become a real trust issue. And one of the most important things actually about driving positive well-being is having a culture of trust. So we've got to be very transparent about how we use the new tools. If we are using them to try and help us understand productivity or mood and emotion, all these sorts of things, we've got to be very transparent about that. And people have got to feel that they've got agency in this debate and how they use it and what information is kept confidential. And then as you rightly touched on, and again, this has been one of my soapboxes for years, is that, we have got to train line managers, people managers better. For far too long we've been talking about the idea of managers being promoted because they're most technically competent in their jobs, and that
still happening.
Yeah, and it is still happening, and they're not training them adequately to develop and support their people. Now, in a world where a whole range of things are happening, this need becomes ever greater. First of all, we've got a far more diverse workforce, and that we need to see as an asset and how we support them. But that also requires some awareness and understanding of line managers, and we know that our subject of diversity and inclusion has got more complex. Some of it's got to, we need to unpick some of it and go back to some of the principles for sure. But we've got to, at the heart of that, help managers understand that, and things like being able to engage people with, for example, neurodiversity as a characteristic, and how do we help managers understand things like that? Plus the fact that people are working very different ways. Hybrid working, flexible working, and the old adage of I needed to see my staff outside my office because then I knew what they were up to. Well, that was never really true, was it? So yes, there are lots of dynamics in all of this where we've got to support and train managers better. AI, as we've already acknowledged, could help with some of that. AI is not just about hard and job skills. It can also help us with some of the soft skills as well.
So HR, coming back to your sort of wheelhouse, HR are the custodians of some of this, but not all of it, perhaps. I'm just wondering how you kind of feel. This is sort of heading towards the future of work piece, but also with this AI piece in mind, how this changes the role of HR but I guess in two places. One in the boardroom, like how do they need to represent to cover some of this, the trust piece, but other things as well. You've been a vocal defender of the role and the value of HR in the past, obviously in your role, but so you personally believe that. So I'm just interested in how that changes and what opportunities and risks there are for HR in the boardroom, but then also I guess thinking more about how HR projects out into the organisation as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And yes, of course I do champion the profession, but I also challenge it. We've got to step up in truth. The reality is that I think there's an incredible need and an incredible opportunity for the profession to work on these kinds of agendas, which are the really strategic and very exciting agendas. I think AI, yes, there are risks and many things we need to understand, but it can be really exciting in terms of understanding how it can enhance work and the things we already talked about. I often talk about it from two dimensions. The first is how HR uses AI within its function. So good examples, which we're fairly familiar with now, are things like using AI in recruitment, whether it be filtering or sourcing or even watching. Because it can monitor. I mean, if you were being recorded as you were doing an interview, AI now is smart enough to read your facial expressions, and for example, has been shown to be more accurate than most people in assessing whether you're lying or not. So this is really interesting, and that has ethical implications, of course.
Yeah.
So there are some really interesting things that within the profession we need to think about AI, particularly as many people say that this could really allow or give HR much more of that space to operate at this more strategic and value-adding level, which most HR professionals want to do, and therefore to help us with the more administrative and bureaucratic tasks. And I think that's true of every function. It's certainly true of HR. So that's one.
Can help with that rebranding.
It definitely can, and then that sort of leans into the other really big agenda for us, which is working with our organizations to understand the ethical and responsible use of AI within our businesses, to work, as I said before, with colleagues, with people who are doing the work alongside the technologists to say, all right, how can this technology enhance and change the nature of the task or the work that you're doing so it produces a better outcome for the person in terms of well-being, but also, of course, in terms of work outcomes, business outcomes. And that is a really, really big and very important agenda, as we've already touched on, which is the space that we're trying a lot to help encourage the profession to lean into. And then at the board level, also a very interesting question. I've been working in a lot of groups, and it's also part of this Innovate UK sponsored work, is to understand the different levels of an organization, what we need to know about. So at the board level, one of the key things is sort of governance around AI. So a lot of these big ethical questions, ethical and responsible use, how's it being used, how are we implementing, how are we thinking about what does an AI strategy actually look like?
It must really take you towards the employment law. They must strengthen the relationship between HR and the employment law.
Yeah, some of it does. And as we know, I mean, you've got things like the EU AI Act, which is building on some of the concerns that GDPR was already confronting us, so things like use and access to data is a good example. But in the UK, we're not quite there on a lot of this stuff, because I think generally the approach in the UK is to try to let some of this develop, and then we'll sort of figure out where and how we regulate, because I think everybody's keen not to put the dampeners on what could be, really a massive evolution in work. So yes, there are a lot of those sorts of legal implications that we'll need to understand. And as I said, ethical, responsible use. But at the board level, a lot of the debate now, and Deloitte just produced a report on this last week, is showing that many, many boards just don't understand the questions. They're not there themselves.
Interesting.
So we actually do need to do work at the board level and at the executive levels to help them understand what are all these positives, but also the risks and the legal and ethical implications. Those are really, really important parts of organizational governance.
And was that, I mean, I haven't seen that report, but was the thrust of that they were looking at it at, and almost thinking about it a collection of individuals using AI rather than the organizational, ethical and broader, the connection to their values, for example, as a board?
Yeah, no, I think that's it, Ben. I mean, I always ask the question when I talk about these subjects. I'll ask people in an audience put their hand up if they use AI themselves, generative AI, and very typically, pretty much all hands go up now. And it's been steadily increasing, of course, because people become more aware. I then ask them, do you think your business has got an AI strategy? And you get a very, very different answer there. Because, as I touched on the panel, one of the things that fascinates me, as I said, I've been around technology quite a lot, and is that previous generations of technology tended to be much more top-down. I mean, if you take enterprise systems, ERP, stuff like that, very top-down, then we're pushing it into the organization, we're training people how to use it. The thing with AI is that people, as those little straw polls would indicate, are using it increasingly themselves.
Yeah.
Which is not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, you want to encourage curiosity. You want people to start to understand a little bit for themselves how it might enhance the work that they're doing. But we need to start to develop these sort of guidelines as to what they need to be aware of, things like data sharing is an obvious one, and data protection. Other things will be around, not believing everything that it'll tell you. We talk a lot about things like hallucinations and so forth. So the AI strategy will
closed loop, open loop,
closed loop, absolutely, and so some of that will be part of what AI strategy should be about, which is yes, encouraging people to engage and have agency in this themselves, and to experiment and to learn, because things are changing very fast. So we have to take a learn and redo kind of approach to a lot of this stuff, but then framed by some clear principles, ethical, responsible guidance, where the legal issues might be, data protection, things like that, and then start to learn collectively as to how do we implement this stuff effectively for everyone. But I think another thing that's making people very concerned is say, well, when do I jump on this fast-moving train? Right? And I do follow a lot of different forums. I talk to a lot of AI people, and oh my goodness, some of the stuff that, there's so many billions of dollars being poured into this field. Almost every day you see announcements of extraordinary stuff.
So does that mean there'll come a point when it is too late for some people, for some organisations?
Yes. 'Cause I think there's that risk. Yeah, I think there's that risk. We've talked about digital disruption for a long time. We've seen whole new business models emerging. We've seen, businesses like Uber and Deliveroo and so forth, which really digital businesses that were created entirely from leveraging technology in ways that the traditional competitors weren't. So absolutely, I think you could see that on steroids with AI. So there is that risk that I think we're all aware of, is that, I've got to keep up. Now, I don't necessarily want to be on the bleeding edge of all of this, but I'd better be fairly fast following, or I could get displaced quite quickly. And that includes, we look at it very seriously for ourselves as the CIPD. I'll give you an obvious example. Access to knowledge and content and learning, right? If that is not increasingly AI-enabled and powered, then we are going to we are going to start to lose out. So we've invested ourselves in building out tools which allow intelligent search. We've trained it on our content, and it's fascinating because not only is it providing really good access to all of our content and also comparing to other sources of content, but it's giving us knowledge as a business about what are the kinds of questions people are asking. And as we know, these are learning systems, so we will get smarter at what the questions are and how we answer them.
You have a real role to play. I do think that's one of the areas where it can really add value, because HR, health and safety, ISO type stuff, anything that's got complex standards, allowing people to explore those standards in a conversational way, rather than having to go leaf through the manual that's like that thick.
That's right.
That's a that is a place that you are well positioned to help people and to leverage the technology to.
We are. Yeah. But as I said, if we don't, then we will get left behind. Because you're absolutely right. I think a lot of people, and including myself, one of the obvious things that we're using these engines for is intelligent search. I'd use it in my personal life. If I wanted to book a hotel for the family or something, then just do it through Gen AI tool, and it'll say, you prompt it with, I want to do a hotel this time of year, no kids or whatever it is, a sunny, reliable climate, and it'll give you it all, and then so lead you into apps and say, do you want to book it now? So it's a similar thing in the business world. So people, expectation and changing very rapidly in their ability to access the content and information they need when they need it in a format that they can readily understand. To your point, not saying, well, here's 5 books you should go and read. No, I want the instant answer. And I want it personalized.
And actionable.
And I want it actionable. And again, AI can help with those things immensely. And those are exactly the things that we're working on within the CIPD, because I said, we want to provide more value to our membership and the communities that access our content. But also we know if we're not doing these things, we could get left behind. And none of us have a right to permanent existence just because we've been around for a while.
So it's a good challenge. It's a good challenge to boards in that sense, isn't it? And to organisational. It's a check step on your values. It's a check step on what you do for your constituency. All of that kind of stuff. So okay, we've got just a couple of minutes left. I wanted to just quickly touch on the sort of bigger societal piece, which we sort of, I guess it's a future of work question, but. I mentioned it before. I was at an event with Dame Carol Black and Charlie Mayfield yesterday, talking about this Keep Britain Working thrust, and there was some pretty pretty fundamental things there about the extent to which, obviously, that's about challenging and trying to reverse the trend of economic inactivity, and I guess by extension, the extent to which our society and our working culture is truly participative. And you know, I think there's a report coming in the summer on that. You've probably been involved in some of those conversations. So I'm just interested in your perspective on the size of that challenge and how, you know, I guess there's very different approaches in some European countries. Some of them probably quite a long way behind us in data terms. Some of them societally very different to us. You know, that have a different take on it and a different, I guess, tax take on people so that they can fund it better. I'm just interested in your kind of perspective from your position as sort of chief exec of the CIPD.
I mean, these are incredibly important agendas and the things we've been involved with for a while, and they're things that, again, our profession can make such an impact on. And when we talk about the purpose of our profession, and this is something I started with when I first started this, the CIPD, is this idea of championing better work and working lives. And therefore, an integral to that is thinking around things like inclusion and diversity. So on these bigger themes, yes, the so-called economically inactive is hitting us in lots of different ways. I mean, as an economy, of course, it has an effect on our welfare system, which we know is very challenging. Also has an impact on people's well-being. I mean, if they're not able to access good work and meaningful work, then of course that impacts them as well. And when we look at the stats, you know, whatever it is, you know, in the 70% of our working age population is working, and the remainder is, for a variety of reasons, not working, so-called economically inactive. One of the challenges we face as a nation is that number has not improved since pre-COVID, whereas pretty much every other European country, and indeed most other countries, have improved their employment rate. And of course, you know, often you'll see economists talk about the unemployment rate, which is relatively low, but that is the people looking for work. There's a large group of people who aren't. And then what are the reasons for it? Well, of course, you've got issues around things like well-being and health conditions. And again, that's something that we can impact to the world of work. And this is what Charlie Mayfield's review is really about, is encouraging businesses to keep people working, to support their well-being at work, so that they don't end up sort of literally dropping off the carriage, as it were, and then struggling to get back into work. So the duty of care that we have as employers, but also the benefits, the business case for retaining your people and helping them to be effective and supporting their well-being, absolutely should be integral to business thinking, as we've already explored.
But do the government need to do something to enable that further? Is it structures that they need to?
Yes, and that's part of the debate. And as Charlie Mayfield would talk about, you know, carrots and sticks, right? So on the one hand, yes, I think we do need to encourage greater transparency of organisations as to what they are actually doing on these things. And we long debated things like, shouldn't well-being of your workforce somehow be a metric that the boards understand and the external stakeholders can understand to encourage businesses to do more of this? So there will definitely be things like that, but also the carrots in terms of what are some of the policies or government programs that can encourage businesses to understand these questions and help them support. But goodness knows, I mean, there's been so much work, hasn't there, over the years, all the different well-being initiatives, mental health
calculators,
all these things. How do we encourage a business to think much more strategically about these questions? Because we know from a lot of the work we've done as a CIPD that when you ask businesses about their wellbeing initiatives, it can appear as a bit of a patchwork of ideas as opposed to really a strategy with some very clear outcomes about things like absenteeism rates and retention rates and creating a supportive culture, these things which are so important, as we know, to things like wellbeing.
So that consistency, that consistent practice is
absolutely. And certainly part of what we're working on with the government is to encourage greater guidance on these things, better support to businesses, but also recognizing, we do need more transparency. We've got to find the ways to encourage businesses to lean into this agenda a lot more. And at the very heart of that, of course, should be the HR profession and wellbeing professionals who can understand what makes the difference and what's the evidence base of all of this. Because that's the final thing I'd say. I mean, when you unpick a lot of stuff around well-being, and I think there's some parallels with diversity and inclusion, have we always understood the evidence that drives it? Have we always understood the outcomes that we're driving for? And the answer is not always. And the outcomes have got to be clearly shown in terms of business impact, because that's what will ultimately make them sustainable. And it is not a paradox to say, well, I'm supporting people, and the two things come together. So we got to be, I think, sharper on the evidence base, clarity of our strategy overall, and definitely clarity as to what business outcomes and benefits this drives.
Absolutely, and the evidence is there. It is often, very often, about how it's presented and pulled together, and how it's used, I think, as well. Listen, we are out of time now, Peter, but thank you so much for your time today. It's been a fascinating conversation.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, I know it's a well due for spend a lot of time on it as well. So good to talk to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. This episode is brought to you by WellHub, the corporate wellness platform transforming how companies care for their teams with a single subscription. Get an exclusive free trial using the link in the description below.